Well, welcome to the Festival of Discovery. I'm Stephanie Knight. I'm project manager at the National Wildfire Centre at the Eden Project in Cornwall. And I'm very excited to be joined today by BBC broadcaster, garden expert and award-winning garden designer Mark Lane. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for
Hello,
joining us.
Stephanie. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, it's lovely to meet you and lovely to have you with us on the Festival of Discovery. So I'd like to start with asking you a bit about your career, really. I understand that you originally studied art history at the University College of London, and then went on to become publishing director at the Royal Institute for British Architects. Is that correct? So what sort of inspired you to make this transition into gardening? I'm really keen to hear about that.
Well, gardening, I suppose, was always in my life because my grandparents were really keen gardeners, and they taught me sort of, I think, probably everything I know today, more or less. But after my sort of career in publishing, in the year 2000, I was in a car crash, and it just meant that I had to reevaluate my career, my life, everything that I was going to basically do. And my husband said to me one day, well, Mark, you know about plants, you know about design. Why don't you put the two together and do something with it? And at the time I thought, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Because publishing, all I knew was publishing. But I did have the wonderful opportunity to work with people like Christopher Lloyd on books. So I already had that sort of knowledge, I suppose, when it came to putting gardening books together as well. So it sort of sat with me for a while. And after the accident, I had a very long rehabilitation period. And just every single day, I would, once I was let home, I used to go out into the garden. And I was amazed by the restorative powers that obviously gardening and being outside was having on both physically and mentally. And I thought to myself, you know what, maybe I should do something with this. I love being outside. I love the plants. I love growing. So I started looking online. And at the time, a lot of the colleges weren't set up for someone in a wheelchair. And it was a little bit tricky, but I eventually found an online course at KLC from Hampton Court and did my diploma in garden design, and that was it. And I haven't looked back since. And then sort of alongside that, as you probably know, with garden design, obviously you get to know your plants and you get to know how to grow stuff. We've got just under an acre of a garden here, so it's like my playground, so I sort of really sort of play with the plants. So that's how I really got into it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that affinity with gardening and being outdoors and pottering around, definitely. And we'll go into the well-being and the mindfulness side of that later on. You mentioned your book, and I know you published a book last year, The Royal Gardens of the World, which looks really interesting. And I was just keen to hear about keen to know if you visited all of those gardens in your book, or have aspiration to, and also which one of those would you say were your favourite gardens of the world?
Oh, that's tricky. So there's 21 gardens in the book. I visited 19 of them. It was a logistical nightmare, but because obviously I wanted to speak with head gardeners, I wanted to speak with restoration people, I wanted to speak with the growers, everybody who was involved with those gardens, and we got it all planned out. It all went very swimmingly. Actually, it was incredible, and with regards to a favorite one, that's tricky. I fell in love with Drottningholm in Sweden, purely because it was immaculate. I went to see it, and it was on a very cold, wintry day, and the snow was just sort of scattered over the parterres and all the wonderful clipped hedging. And it just looked absolutely stunning. And really sort of, I think because it was covered in snow, it really sort of showed off the structure of the garden. But within the book, I really wanted to show or explain what a royal garden is. And I think a lot of the time people sort of think of a royal garden as just belonging to a palace or a castle. Whereas I wanted to show, well, actually, it can also be private spaces, so such as Highgrove with Prince Charles, or the wonderful water garden in Bali called Tirtaganga, or it could be a royal botanical garden, such as Kew. So it was quite tricky because I had to sort of limit myself to 20 odd gardens. We got a German co-edition at the same time and an Italian co-edition at the same time. So I had to put in 2 additional Germans and 2 additional Italian gardens. So I had to lose a few, but it was, yeah, it was a wonderful thing to do. Really great to write. I researched just under 1,000 historical figures,
Wow.
as well as, you know, current head gardeners, etc. But you know, every single garden, you know, didn't matter where I was in the world. Everybody wanted to share their knowledge and impart their knowledge, and I think that was so lovely about it. But the biggest problem was trying to sort of weave together all of the history, because obviously, you know, a lot of these gardens were done during the 17th, 18th centuries, when a lot of people, there was a lot of cross marriages going on in order to gain territories, and trying to weave that story so that if you were looking at one particular country and you could then see some of the same characters in some of the others, that was the tricky balance to do. But I also got really fascinated by archaeobotanical research. And obviously there's been loads of work at Alhambra, but also at the Taj Mahal, and just seeing how they literally, you know, take a sample of the land, dig down, and just by pollen analysis and by grain analysis, they can actually tell what was being grown at what time. And you know, a garden, as we know, is never a standalone thing. It actually is a reflection of the history, the people, everything
Mm.
that's going on around it. So yeah, and I love that, and I just love the stories.
Yeah, it's not just the plants that are there, it's the story behind it.
Yeah,
So yeah, I completely agree with that, and I'll look forward to reading it. So and I know that there'll be people that will be listening to this that don't have a space where they can garden, or don't think they have, because I think people think you need this, you know, big area, big lawn space, or you need some space where you actually go outdoors and you can actually be in. But I think that you can create gardening spaces out of pretty much anywhere, can't you? And I just wonder if you had any, you know, tips for people who don't have access to what we would call a typical garden, and perhaps they just have a balcony
yeah.
space in London or something, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I mean, some people say 2030, but others say 2050. But by that year, you know, 70% of the world's population is going to be living in urban environments. And that normally means smaller gardens, smaller spaces. And, you know, apartment living has really taken off. And I think it's great to see that, you know, millennials in particular have really taken to gardening and in a big way. But, you know, it doesn't matter really what size your area is. You can still grow something. And I always say to people, you know, look at the horizontal plane. So look, you know, look down what's on the ground, think about the space, but also look at the vertical plane. So if you've got a really lovely strong wall, then think about, you know, introducing a living wall or even just some climbers up with some trellis. But also it's about thinking about that space and thinking about it in a multifunctional way. So if it comes to furniture, for example, think about folding furniture. So you can store it away and then you've got a little bit of space left if you want to do, I don't know, some yoga in the morning, or you want to have a couple of people around for a drink. But, you know, you can grow literally anything in a pot, from, you know, a small annual or a bulb all the way up to a tree. Obviously, you need the right size pot and the right medium, and obviously you need to be aware of weight if it is on a roof terrace or a balcony. But I would just say, you know, go for it and don't feel that you can't grow something. And I come across this all the time where people, either get in touch with me directly or via the TV shows, and they sort of say, well, I've only got, an area which is, 2 meters by 2 meters, and I've got a couple of pots on there, but I want it to look good for as many months of the year as possible. And I say to them, well, you can, there's no reason why you can't. Obviously, if you do want, interest, and you haven't got time to actually do the gardening, then think about evergreens. Evergreens are going to give you that structure and the shape and the form. Underplant things with bulbs a lot of the time, because they're going to pop up, and you can have, and also, when it comes to bulbs, a lot of people think they're just spring flowering bulbs, but obviously you can get bulbs throughout the year. So you can underplant,
Absolutely.
let them shoot up. I would say it doesn't matter. And I always, there's a phrase that I use, and it's that it doesn't matter if you've got a rolling estate or just a pot outside your front door, you can still garden. And there's nothing better than getting your hands into that soil and releasing those endorphins and serotonin to make us feel good. And yeah, it doesn't matter. Everybody can do it, even inside. House plants have taken off enormously. And it's great to see that. But also, if you've got even just say a sunny room, and you want to grow, I don't know, sun-loving plants, then you can still grow stuff on the windowsill. You might need to sort of water them a little bit more often, because you have to be more in control of that plant because it's indoors. But don't worry, you can still grow it, and have a go. My garden is full of failures. And I think most gardeners have failures in their garden, in their gardens. But that's how we learn. If you just keep on going, then you're going to reap those rewards and enjoy it at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned your challenges in access and gardening, and you would like to see gardening become more inclusive. And I see it as it could be fully inclusive. It has,
Yeah.
gardening is. What tips can you give people on how that they can make their gardens more accessible to everybody? And how do you make your garden accessible to you? Would you suggest sort of raised beds and things? Like how would you, how have you adapted your garden?
The first thing I always say to people is forget about the garden and look at yourself and assess yourself. So look at how far you can twist your body, how far you can reach. Can you lean forward? Can you lean backwards? Can you, get out? If you're in a chair, can you get out and kneel down? If not, are you always in the chair? If so, then what height are your legs in relation to any tables you might need to get under? So really sort of have a look at your sort of the physicality of your body, but also what it is that your body can and can't do. Can you twist your wrist, for example? Can you reach up high? Can you reach down low? Once you know that, then you can start building the garden around what it is that you can actually do. So often I go to gardens where someone's very proudly saying, yes, it's fully accessible and really inclusive. And I see normal raised beds. Now, the problem with raised beds are, yes, don't get me wrong, they are brilliant. They do lift the garden up. But if you're, say, in a wheelchair and you can't twist your torso, then all you're doing is this down one side.
That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely.
So they don't always work, whereas raised tables or mangers are sometimes a lot better. But again, you have to really try them out, because you have to see if you can get your legs underneath them, whether you're comfortable when you're leaning, into the planter. If you are using raised beds, then obviously again think about how far you can reach. So don't make a raised bed, 3 meters deep if you're not going to be able to reach the other side. Also, think about having planters on wheels so you can move things around. Also, if you have a problem, say, with heavy materials such as big bags of compost, then there are some wonderful sort of little lifts that you can buy, and they're not hugely expensive. Some are hydraulic, which are a little bit more expensive, but you can just literally put the bag on there. You can press a little button. It comes up to your height that you need to work at, and therefore it's, you can do gardening as you want. And then I would say that when you've sorted out what it is you can do, when you've sorted out, say, what tools you will need or what equipment with regards to planting, then sort of the most important thing is to pace your activities. And what I mean by that is that all you need to do is find out how long you can comfortably work for. So let's say that's, I don't know, 20 minutes. And then you feel like you need a bit of a break, or you need to sit down, or you need a cup of tea or something. So set a timer on your clock or on a leg timer for, say, 20 minutes. Work for those 20 minutes, then stop for 10 minutes and go and have your cup of tea, go and have a sit down. If it's my case, I'll go and have a cup of tea and maybe 4 or 5 biscuits. And then once the alarm goes off again after 10 minutes, come out for another 20 minutes and just continue that. And actually, you'll be amazed, and you'll actually get more done because you won't be so shattered, because you're actually pacing your activities.
Yeah, that's true.
So, it's some very simple ideas, but actually just by looking at those and just breaking things down also, gardening doesn't discriminate. So, anybody can garden. And I am a great believer that it doesn't matter what level of ability you have, what age you are, anybody can garden. There's always something.
That's really great advice, Mark. Actually, all of that is wonderful advice. Thank you very much. I think that's going to be really useful to people listening. And I know you're an ambassador for organisations such as Thrive and Groundwork. And I'm just keen to hear how you the importance of these organisations and in connecting people with one another and with obviously the outdoors, and how important do you think that is, having those organisations?
It's hugely important. I mean, I've seen firsthand, especially at Thrive, for example, at their head office in Reading, where they've got a beautiful walled garden, where they have their clients, and each client gets their own sort of little plot that they can decorate in their own colours. It gets quite competitive, which is quite interesting. But these individuals may never have stepped outside the door. They may never have spoken to another living soul. But suddenly you put them into this garden setting and you just watch them, and they're like this the whole time. You can't stop them. And it's lovely to see. And as I say, they get competitive as well, which is really good, because it's, they get really behind it and they want to grow, the most potatoes or the largest sunflower, whatever. But, I think also what's also important is that, gardening can be a passive activity, or it can be an active activity. It can be a solitary activity, but it can also be a group or community activity. And organisations such as Thrive, Greenfingers, Groundwork, Leonard Cheshire, Core Landscapes, etc., that I work with, they're all about community and bringing people together. And, we hear a lot about isolation, and isolation isn't only in older people, it's also in the young as well. And we're seeing more of it. And of course, we saw a lot of it during the pandemic. So just being able to bring people outdoors and enjoy nature, and being able to just share a story with someone, or just have a natter while you're digging or weeding, can mean everything to that one individual, or even to that group of individuals. So yeah, I love the work that I do with the charities, and I think that through social and therapeutic horticulture in particular, it really does show that gardening brings people together.
Absolutely. Well, we've touched on well-being. How do you see gardening playing a role in people's mental health and well-being moving forward, especially with what we've all been through in the last, what it feels lifetime, but in the last year and a half, 2 years. And I mean, we've seen the sort of social prescribing really taking off now, which is fantastic, and I think we'd love to see more of that. But sort of community groups and things like that, I think, are really important. So
Yeah,
encourage?
I
Mm.
would say the important thing is having that strong network so that the GPs, for example, know who's in their area. So, if you do have a community gardening group or whatever, let your GP know. And if you have someone there who's doing social and therapeutic horticulture, then they know that that's the place that they can send individuals. But I know from my own experience after my accident, I live and still live with comorbid depression, and I have the spectre of depression, I call him, sitting on my shoulder. He's
Mm.
always there. And just by, I know sometimes it's very difficult to sort of either get yourself out of bed or to get outside, especially if it's a horrible day. But if you've got a garden or you don't have a garden, then, please get outside, because just even 10 minutes can really sort of help recharge the batteries. It slows down our breathing, our shoulders drop, we become less stressed. If you're doing, say, something like weeding, it almost becomes like an act of mindfulness, so your mind starts to wander, which is even better. But also, going back to sort of that whole community idea, gardening is great with regards to just being able to talk. So it's a great way of bringing someone out of themselves, if, say, they are living with depression or anxiety, and just talk to them. And it can obviously
Mm.
be starting off and talking about gardening, and then just, someone can ask them, well, how are you feeling today? And that can then lead on to another conversation. But I think you're absolutely right in that, we've all experienced some form of mental, I don't want to say impairment, but I would say some kind of mental condition over the last 18 months. And it's how you deal with it personally, but also how you can deal with it as a group that's important.
Mm.
And I urge anyone to get help and find help. Talk to individuals. Sometimes, uh, you know, I spoke on Morning Live actually after the accident. I went through these 7 stages of grief, and a lot of the time people associate grief just with death. But
Mm.
actually, grief can be anything. It could be even, the breaking of your favorite mug. You're going to go through that angry stage. You're going to go through that upsetting stage, etc. So, you know, do talk about it, but it doesn't always have to be a professional. Sometimes it could just be a neighbor, or it could just be a friend, and just talk to them. And if you then feel like you do need to get that additional help, then obviously go to your GP, or call Samaritans, or call someone some
Mm.
helpline who might be able to help you. But we know the fact that wonderful serotonin and endorphins are released in the brain when we're out there physically gardening.
Mm.
We know that there are volatile oils that come off plants that help us feel better as well. There's so much. I think there's even a lot more that we don't actually know what gardens and nature are actually physically doing to us, both mentally and physically. So I think we could do more of it. And I just think that if you haven't got a garden, then just go for a walk. Try and go to a local park, even if it's just for 10 minutes, just to go and recharge your batteries. For me, when I go out gardening, or if I'm out and about in nature, I call it my green pill, because it makes me feel better for being out there. And even just on a rainy day, just feeling the rain on your skin, or just feeling a breeze on your cheek,
Mm.
can make all that difference.
Mm.
But if you're a little bit less mobile and you may be stuck in your house, if you've got a sort of a sunny or a sunny-ish facing window, then just sit in the window, open the window, and just sit there and let the sun just drench your face. And believe me, you will start to feel more relaxed, and you will
Mm.
start to feel better for it.
Mm. These are really great little, real tangible things people can do, aren't they? They're very small things, but they make such a big difference. And
Absolutely.
on a daily basis, they build up, and they will make you feel better. Sort of final closing question really is, if you could invite everyone watching to do one thing that they think might make a difference, a positive difference today, what do you think that might be?
I would say either go and buy a plant or ask a friend if you could take a cutting off a plant, or and basically just bring a plant home. And whether that's, you know, a freebie from someone or whether that's going out and buying one, because if by bringing that plant home you're doing a little bit for your garden, a little bit for your green space, you're also doing that bit for your own mentality as well, because looking at that green is going to make you feel better. So just by doing that, you know, I think that will make all the difference for one little task.
I agree. Well, thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and there's been some great advice there and some really great tips. And yeah, best of luck with everything. And thank you so much for joining us on our Festival of Discovery here at Eden.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much.